Welcome everybody. It looks like we're live. We're going to give the attendees some more time to join here. So we'll sit and hold till a few minutes after and then get started. Yes, welcome everybody. We'll be sure to go through key takeaways and some agenda items before we jump into everything. So feel free to hop into the chat, which I already see people doing, and we'll sit tight for another couple minutes here.
Wow, I love the fact that we've got such a great worldwide audience. India, Canada, Baltimore. It's amazing.
And for new folks joining, we'll start in just a couple minutes. We want to give the attendees a minute or two to join here. We'll start at about 3 after. Let's jump on in. We'll let the others join as they trickle in. So welcome everybody, appreciate you joining. Today we're going to be talking about the shareholder value that comes from creating and fostering these communities. So we have a panelist group of experts here bringing their unique perspectives on this. Excited to share some of those different opinions from where they come in the market. So what we ultimately want people to walk away with are some strategic advantages that you'll have to shareholder engagement. The industry insights from the experts that I mentioned, that's our panelist group here, and ideally some actionable insights on how to leverage this for your own brand. Before we jump in, right, we'll get to this agenda here. We're going to meet the panelists. We're going to talk about why shareholder engagement matters, share some of these industry insights and best practices, as well as Q&A. But we'll warm things up with a quick poll. Let's get to know each other a little bit more here, and we can drop a poll question here in the chat. All right. So which of the following methods do you currently use to engage your shareholders? So far, 100% participation, and number one there, personalized communications. All right. Interesting. We've got some people in the do not engage yet. That is good. Well, it could be better, but that's why we're here. We'll talk about some of those strategies. Fantastic. As I mentioned for the agenda, we'll start off, we'll meet the panelists. We'll get into a more in-depth discussion with each of them. And we'll move on to Q&A and save that for the back end. So if you have questions, hold them till the end. You're welcome to drop them in the chat. We'll make sure that we get them answered, but we'll make sure to save time for that on the back end. Without further ado, let's jump in and meet our panelists. Matt, if you want to get us started off, please.
Yeah. Hey everyone, appreciate you joining us today. My name is Matt Joanou. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Stakeholder Labs. we work with publicly traded companies to help them modernize their shareholder experience and provide shareholder marketing software and tools. My background, I actually started my career in the digital loyalty world. I spent a couple of years at a startup called Punched that we eventually sold to Google in 2011. And at Google really had a education in digital marketing. So understanding everything from search to display to video, and working with teams across Fortune 1000 companies to help them ramp up their digital engagement with their customers. And then prior to Stakeholder Labs, I jumped from Google to Reddit and joined Reddit after the founders came back and had a front row seat to the rise of the retail investor. And within the context of self-organized online communities, really saw the power of those communities within the financial markets as we saw a shift in the demographics of retail shareholders and just increased participation through the neo-brokerages and the financial education that was happening on a lot of these platforms. So really excited to talk about shareholder engagement and strategies and how you can create alignment with your company and the folks that believe in it and want to make a bet on the long-term upside of what you're trying to accomplish as a business. So looking forward to chatting.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. Richard.
Yeah, hi all. So I'm Richard. I'm the General Counsel at BrewDog. We're a Scottish headquartered global brewing company. So we brew our own beer and also operate a network of bars across the globe. We have 4 breweries globally. Our principal home here in the UK. We have one in the USA in Canal Winchester and Columbus. We have one in Berlin in Germany and one in Brisbane in Australia. Pertinent to today's discussion, we are a actively crowdfunded business and have been since 2009. We've raised over 95 million GBP in crowdfunded equity across several equity fund raises in the UK, 2 in the USA and 1 in Australia. And my day-to-day job encompasses managing those shareholder relationships, the legal and regulatory aspects of our shareholder community. And also prior to joining BrewDog, I was a crowdfunding shareholder within the business also. So I've seen it from both sides. And I'm really interested to chat to you all today about my experiences from that side.
Great. Richard, thanks so much. We'll be sure to ask you about the Equity for Punks program. We're excited about it. Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Annison. I'm one of the co-founders of LegionM, and we're the world's first fan-owned entertainment company. And so our company is we produce and distribute and develop and monetize and market film and television content. And that makes us similar to thousands of other companies. But the one thing that makes us unique is the fact that we're the first that was built literally from the ground up to be owned by fans using equity crowdfunding. Our logo, you can see the M in our logo is the Roman numeral for 1 million, because our long-term goal is to unite 1 million fans as shareholders of the company. And the idea behind this is really simple. It's that an entertainment company that's owned by a large engaged audience of fans has fundamental competitive advantages throughout every section of the value chain in entertainment. It makes it easier to get your films green lit. It makes them easier to release. And then when they come out, you've got a legion of fans that are ready to come out opening night and see it and talk about it online and all that sort of stuff. So for us, the shareholder engagement is one of the core pillars that our company is founded upon. And so it's just a topic that is near and dear to our hearts.
Certainly. Well, Jeff, thank you very much. Yeah, a phrase we use a lot is that supercharged customer shareholder, when they're both your shareholder and your customer, right? It provides some of the benefits that you mentioned, some of the strategic insights that we'll be sharing today are tied into that, how people can think of not just engagement here, but the strategic advantage their business has when you are able to engage shareholders in this way. So for the panel discussion, we're going to start with Matt here as well. So Matt, you bring an interesting perspective, not just by, where you've come from in terms of background at the companies you've been at, whether that's Google or Reddit, but also as a technology provider in the space. So I'll hand it over to you, but I think that's sort of the slant that would be interesting for people to hear about. So let's jump on into that portion of this and allow you to go in further about what you all do at Stakeholder Labs, and I'll save some of my questions for the back end.
Yeah, definitely. Excited to dive in. On our end, as you alluded to, John, we're focused primarily on publicly traded companies. And what we've seen over the last 10 years is really a demographic shift. We've seen millennial and Gen Z investors coming online through brokerages like Robinhood and Webull, and they come with different expectations. They've grown up in a world where they're able to connect digitally to brands as customers. They're used to personalized experiences, and they like to have that direct connection with the companies that they're customers of. And we're starting to see that translate to their relationship to companies as shareholders. And so over the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen those expectations really create a demand for more premium digital experiences from the companies themselves. So looking at things like IR websites, looking at things like communications, our companies sending out quarterly shareholder newsletters, and then also looking at where are they showing up. You're seeing more and more public company CEOs utilize things like podcasts to go directly to their different stakeholders, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg going on Morning Brew recently, or we've seen Elon utilize a lot of different channels to get his messages out there, direct through Twitter, going on the Joe Rogan podcast. But really with all of this, it comes back to how are you creating touch points on that shareholder journey through software tools that can measure the impact. And so at Stakeholder Labs, we built a platform that helps public companies engage more directly, measure the results, and optimize to really meet their long-term goals in how they're engaging with those shareholders. We have a platform that offers a modern IR website experience to publicly traded companies. We have shareholder benefits. That's a great tool to align with your shareholders, whether that be a consumer company or even a B2B company. A lot of these shareholders want to engage more directly, and they're looking for those touch points. And then we also help through measurement and providing the data connection to the actual brokerages that the shareholders hold themselves. So with the advent of a lot of these financial technologies, there's an opportunity for the public companies to see this data coming in real time and to actually own the connection directly with their shareholders. So when we're working with a public company, we're encouraging them to really control those touch points and have access to the first party data. And the tenets of digital marketing that we've seen roll out over the last 10 to 20 years, we're just now at the beginning phases of seeing those apply to shareholder engagement and shareholder communications. And so with this platform, it's really starting to look at a term we've coined. What is the shareholder lifetime value? How are we measuring that? How are these things affecting their hold times, whether or not they're reinvesting, how they're advocating for the company? In the case of publicly traded companies, looking at, are they participating in proxy? Are they good corporate citizens as shareholders? And all of those things can be measured in a digital world. So we're building the operating system for these public companies to engage. And I think the last thing I'll say, John, is that we started our journey really focused on retail shareholders and how do you engage more directly with these retail shareholders. We find that a lot of these same principles and practices can also apply to institutional investors, whether they be big funds or VCs, or depending on the stage of the company. You still want to communicate directly, you still want to be authentic, you still want to be using digital channels with modern content. We found that analysts at big funds, they're on Twitter, they're on Reddit, they're consuming content in modern ways. And so I think while our focus has always been retail, we're finding that these same practices around enhancing the shareholder experience can provide value to your relationships with your bigger investors as well. So it's less and less about institutional versus retail, and it's more about what is a modern shareholder experience for everyone and providing that in places that are more accessible for all of those shareholders.
Yeah, certainly. And thanks for sharing that, because I wanted to ask about some of those expectations, right? You can imagine the end user, whether they're at a fund or somebody directly investing through Robinhood, that could be the same person. So their expectation in terms of the medium and the sort of clean nature of the website and how that looks, they want that user experience to be really smooth, or, provide the tools that you're talking about, regardless of who it is. So, those are certainly technology shifts or just changes in people's use of technology that we at DealMaker think a lot about, right? Because, we're helping people raise capital online. But shifting back to the retail investor, you bring this really interesting perspective from your time at Reddit, right? Which is this front row seat to a new generation of, not just internet user, but also investor, now that they're public, and what they did with that shareholder program, right? So I'd be curious some of your insights about today's retail investor, how that's changed, the trends, what they expect. Because it sounds like, you all had some foresight in thinking about, how to help companies meet those expectations of the end user.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think being at Reddit and watching the journey through the IPO process, I think they did a few things right. They started the process before the IPO. So they were thinking about how they were going to engage at scale with their communities ahead of the IPO. They were really intentional about understanding what do their shareholders care about. And I think that's a question that we like to ask the companies we work with is, who are your shareholders today? What do they care about? Why did they invest in the first place? And how are you aligning with those different cohorts? And at Reddit, they have a very deep understanding of who their users are, why they're engaging with the platform. And as they went public, they made some assumptions around, hey, we think that they're going to behave this way and that X, Y, and Z might be interesting to them. So actually bringing them into the IPO process, offering shares or the ability to buy shares for folks that met a certain threshold of participation as users or customers of the platform was really a clever approach. And they built a solid, healthy base and foundation of shareholders that are bought into the platform and that love the platform as consumers and are now shareholders and have a stake in the long-term upside of the platform. So I think that alignment, and if it's a consumer company, obviously focusing on your customers, why are they customers? Why did they buy that first product? And then how does that bridge into the shareholder experience as well is a great first place to start. And I think lastly, I'll double down on looking at how millennial and Gen Z consumers are behaving translates really well into how they behave as shareholders. And it's a different context, but fundamentally it's a very similar set of mechanics. And I think what a lot of companies get into the trap of is they're checking the box on their shareholder engagement. They're not necessarily thinking about how do we provide a journey for these shareholders that leads to different KPIs, different goals that we want to see from those shareholders. And with all of that, it requires measurement, it requires attribution, and ultimately understanding how are these things working. If they're working, let's turn them up. If they're not, let's adjust. And there's a lot of different tools and levers today that are being under leveraged by companies, whether it be a public company with their investor relations team or a private company where a lot of that's falling on the finance team or the CEO and founder, but there's more that could be done. I think the gap that we've had historically is, how do we measure that? How do we know if it's effective and understand what's actually moving the needle?
Yeah, certainly. Key takeaways there that I'm picking up on: people don't start early enough, right? And thinking about how to plan this process. Clearly, Reddit had done that. And also the alignment, I think, for any brand, whether it's a good or service, right? there are ways to align your shareholders and community with that. And, when you're able to unlock that, right, you create a Reddit user for life. If they're also a shareholder, they're very incentivized in the platform's growth, right? Matt, last question here, touching on some of what you said, these technology challenges that companies have, measuring these things. We had spoken before about you're watching AMC and them launching their Investor Connect program to a lot of fanfare. I'm just curious, when you're talking to companies, why aren't more of them doing this already and leveraging some of these tools?
Yeah, it's a great question. So shareholder benefits programs historically were very common. So folks like McDonald's, folks like Ford had benefits for their shareholders. And over the last, call it 20 to 30 years, a few things happened. So one, they became very expensive. Two, they became hard to manage. And three, they weren't sure whether or not this was moving the needle. Was it actually affecting the behavior? Fast forward to today, you're actually seeing a lot of those programs come back online. And AMC is a great example. They offered free popcorn to shareholders and saw over 1 million signups in the first several months, had a lot of follow-on shareholder benefits that they built on top of that. And they really used it as a dual purpose vehicle to drive shareholder loyalty. So increasing hold time, reinvestment, et cetera. But also they saw it as a channel from a marketing standpoint to drive butts and seats at movie theaters and really hit that top line growth that they were aiming at. And so I think from our standpoint, the things that have changed, the cost has come down through digital channels. A lot of these things, I mean, you think about a box of popcorn, it's less than $1 that they're offering, and someone's coming in, they're spending $15 to $30 at each movie. So the cost has come down and it's actually contributing to growth, and you can attribute revenue to shareholder engagement. The vehicle of deployment is much easier. You're going from literally folks having to send in copies of their shares or copies or PDFs of their brokerage to doing this in real time, being able to validate through a brokerage connection that someone's a shareholder and delivering that benefit digitally. So that's made things a lot easier. And then lastly, the measurement piece of, hey, what's the ROI? How are we actually understanding in the AMC case how much those customers are spending when they come to AMC? Are they holding their shares? And looking at it through that dual purpose lens to understand that, hey, this is actually increasing spend from the customer standpoint. And we've done some analysis with other consumer companies. You see 2x, 3x spend from shareholders. And then also looking at how is this increasing the shareholder lifetime value? Again, increasing hold times, increasing participation rates in proxy, advocacy as shareholders publicly through social channels and elsewhere. So looking at all of that, I think we're seeing this comeback of shareholder benefits program because it is a very strong lever in people's tools. And the last thing I'll say about all of this is it doesn't necessarily have to be everything all at once. I think a lot of companies we talk to, it sounds like this huge lift of launching this program. How do we do this? Starting small can be a great approach. So whether it's something like we're going to offer a simple coupon to shareholders, or we're going to tie this into our existing loyalty program, but it's really about building that foundation and then following a lot of the community playbook from a marketing perspective, and small actions consistently over a long period of time lead to great long-term outcomes. So I think talking to the folks on this call, don't try to bite everything off all at once when you kick off, but start small and build up into the direction that you want to head.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of companies that can psych themselves out thinking about every, bell and whistle they can tack on there. But like you said, start small, because so many brands, you see them out there talking about wanting to have a one-to-one relationship with their customer, and very few are doing it in such an impactful way, starting with their shareholders, particularly when you mention that they'll spend more, they'll refer more people, right? It's better overall for your brand equity. So Matt, really appreciate that perspective that you bring to it. Richard, next we're going to shift over to you. So, what you all did at BrewDog was certainly foundational to the industry, right, of raising capital online, a wonderful way to tie it into the brand that BrewDog has, right? There is sort of a punk rock element to what you all have done and built, and the equity for punks, again, sort of a foundational movement in the industry, and really setting the bar for a lot of other companies out there. So thanks for joining us, and would love to have you tack on to that before I ask some additional questions.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it kind of leads off of the final points that Matt was discussing there also, in terms of brand engagement and shareholder awards and things like that. So as a small craft brewer in far north of Scotland, it was very interesting as a customer initially of BrewDog to watch that growth, which from 2009 onwards has really been fairly astronomical. And BrewDog has been one of the fastest growing UK businesses for 11 years in a row. So quite a track record. And part of that is absolutely down to the Equity for Punks program. So the name comes from our flagship beer, which is Punk IPA. The founders of our business, James Watt and Martin Dickey, were hugely influenced by the US craft beer scene. Stone Brewing in particular acted kind of as mentors to the guys in the early days. But one of the key things was lack of capital. Nobody was investing in craft beer businesses in the UK in 2009. It was immediately after the credit crunch, the global credit crisis that spread throughout the world in 2008 and early 2009. So James and Martin said, how are we going to get capital to build this business that we really believe in? And people were coming up to them when they were selling the beer at market stalls and at events saying, how can I get more of your beer? I'd love to get more of your beer. And they said, well, actually, if you want more of the beer, how about we sell you some equity? To do that, we're going to give you some discounts as well, so you get the beer for a bit cheaper. But also they realized that giving very passionate customers of the business some equity in the business, they would become brand advocates for life. My own personal journey is in about 2011, a friend of mine introduced me to BrewDog beer, and initially I thought, this is great, I've never tasted beer like this before, I really enjoy it. And he had become an Equity for Punk shareholder in the first round of shareholding for us. And he said, I think they might be doing another one soon. If they do, you should buy shares. You get discounts on the beer. It's great. So Equity for Punks 2 came along. I invested in that. And then I became a huge advocate for the brand, much like the other people that I was talking to at the time. Fast forward 2 or 3 years, I was a partner in a law firm here in the UK, and I was approached by James Watt through some social media interactions to come and join BrewDog as their first lawyer and their head of legal. And I immediately jumped at the chance. And part of the reason for that was the feeling for the brand that people had. They were true advocates. And I would go to some of the BrewDog bars in the UK and get into really, kind of in-depth discussions with other Equity for Punk shareholders, not only about BrewDog, but about craft beer in general, about the beers that they enjoyed, about the cool things that the company was doing that they really got engaged in. Since joining back in 2015, we've really kind of, moved our Equity for Punks program through several gears. And part of that was driven by, we've got investors, there's a growing number of investors. It's great to give them discounts and things like that. But what can really supercharge that growth and get people not only investing for the first time, but sometimes reinvesting as well? So we offered tiered perks for reinvestors where they would get a beer cooler if they invested a certain level. And all of this was direct discussion with our shareholders to help build that program and build how we could grow that community. And many of our Equity for Punks raises have been purpose driven. So in the early days, the purpose of the crowdfunding was to build a new brewery, to expand the brewery, to open more bars, to expand our global footprint. But interestingly, the last raise that we did in 2021, so after the COVID pandemic and other things that affected the global economies, the thing that really got us passionate was sustainability, and we wanted to get into ensuring that we were going to have a world to continue brewing beer in the future. And that really struck a chord with many investors. And interestingly, Equity for Punks Tomorrow, which we called it, not only raised the highest dollar value in terms of actual capital, but it also grew our community by a much higher number than any of the previous raises as well. We added 73,000 people to our community through that raise alone. So that is really important to us. And part of the lifeblood of our business, we always say, are our people, the beer that we brew, and our Equity Punk shareholders. They're absolutely part of the decision-making process that we use going forward. We're in a transitional period as a business now. We've discussed whether we're going to move to an IPO at some point. We had hoped to have IPO'd before now, but the IPO market has not been great since COVID hit in 2020. But even when we IPO, the plan is to take those shareholders with us and keep those core benefits there in terms of discounts in our bars and other cool things that we can do for those shareholders, because we really do feel that makes these people very strong brand advocates.
Yeah, certainly. I appreciate the note about purpose-driven, right, and sort of milestone, right, based financing rounds. It's something that we talk to our customers a lot about, and sort of how do you wrap your raise in something tangible that people can really get behind. For you all, since you had this base of Equity Punks already, did that give you sort of a platform to stand on when you go to the next round, right? Like, what did you see from activation from that group when you would launch the next round of purpose-driven financing, right? Obviously, you had mentioned that a large group came in for the Equity for Punks Tomorrow, but I'm assuming, since you already had this base, you were able to launch that raise directly into them and leverage some of that capital to expand from there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
No, absolutely spot on. Yeah. So the raises that we did since I joined in 2015 have also offered referral perks for existing shareholders. So when we launch a funding round, we will say to existing shareholders, if you refer 2 people, you get X number of perks. If you refer 5 people, 10 people, and so on. And our existing shareholders got really into that, so much so that we had to build essentially a leaderboard of who had referred the most people to become first-time investors in BrewDog through Equity for Punks 4, 5, and 6. And we built in those tiered benefits as well. So as well as trying to reward new investors, we rewarded our existing investors for bringing new people to the community, for adding new shareholders to that, because it's great to get reinvestment, absolutely, because the cash value there from reinvestors shows that you've got that firepower to go and invest in the infrastructure and capital builds that you want to do. But as a beer business, we are absolutely 100% about beer in the glass for as many customers as possible. Our whole mission is to make other people as passionate about good beer as we are. So the more people that get involved in that, the better. So the community building aspect is huge for us. So it's not just about the dollar or pound value, it's about the size of the community. So getting other people to refer new individuals to us was absolutely key and paramount to that.
Certainly. Incredible to have to build the leaderboard as a result of the demand for people bringing in referrals. That's great. So obviously, they propelled some of the raises, right, going forward as you had built up this audience of the Equity for Punks, right, or your punks. Talk to us a little bit about some of the strategic advantages. Obviously, there are some built-in sales for, with this group, right, I'm sure they're much more likely to repurchase and that sort of thing. I'm curious if you all have been able to make any business decisions based on, your community, right? Whether that's opening up bars or launching, different beers, right? Can you share anything about what you've been able to do tapping into this audience from like a business strategy perspective?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, throughout the history of BrewDog, we have tried to actively engage our shareholders as much as possible. We offered our shareholders the right to essentially vote for where we would open our next BrewDog bars. So we would ask them to say, if we got to X number of equity punks in a town or city, we would commit to opening a bar there within a set period of time. So we opened a couple of bars in places where we had quite a large equity for punk community there, and they became the kind of staunch supporters of those bars. We also engaged directly with them on the types of beer that we brew, whether we should really rebrew any previous nice beers, any things that they actually liked a lot. So we offer our community the right to vote on an annual basis. What beers do you want to see making a comeback this year? And we also engage with them through a shareholder forum. It's essentially just a discussion board. We allow them to discuss any topics they wish. They can open any kind of discussion points on that. But we have direct engagement with the CEO and the shareholders on that forum as well. And that includes in the past things like, do you like our new branding? What kind of color schemes do you like for this type of thing? We're thinking about changing the beer menu boards in our bars. What do you think of these ideas? And to be honest, leaning into these things as well, we've made some business decisions in the past that actually our EFP community have called us out on and said, well, we're not sure that's the right thing to do. And we've engaged very much with them on that. And when that happens, it feels almost like they're a little bit of a conscience, the voice on your shoulder saying, are you sure you want to do that? This is not necessarily the BrewDog we invested in. And that's actually helped us roll back a couple of things in the past as well, where we've been potentially doing something that big beer companies might do and didn't really feel that was within our DNA. So, all of those things are active community engagement, which work very well for us.
Incredible. I absolutely love that. So many brands roll something out and it's, a handful of people in the room making the decision, and then, they get torched by their audience. No better way to be able to ask people first. And also the business strategy of, a bar can be in a neighborhood near you if we, have the audience there. Really incredible engagement there. That's impressive. I'd like to shift over to Jeff now. Jeff, you mentioned LegionM. In the name, it implies, million shareholders. I think, years from now, we'll see companies created more with that mindset there. Obviously, we're all big fans of that, with starting out of the gate from, a perspective of shareholder engagement. I'd love to have you expand on that and the mission behind that, and some of what you've been able to build as a result of thinking about shareholder engagement first, right? And then I'll tack on some questions to the back. Oh, Jeff, you're on mute.
Wow, that was a rookie move. Sorry about that.
You were waiting quietly.
LegionM was literally founded because of equity crowdfunding, and I think that's a distinction for a lot of that really defines a lot of what we do. I mean, there's a lot of people that use equity crowdfunding to raise money for their business, and we are huge proponents of equity crowdfunding. We've raised over $20 million from over 50,000 investors in the company, and it's like we believe in it. And as someone in my previous life as a serial entrepreneur, we've raised over $150 million from venture capitalists from a previous company, and we've raised money from friends and family and bootstrapped. And so I feel like I've raised money probably every way possible. Equity crowdfunding, I think, is amazing. It's not easy. It's really hard, and there's a lot of unique challenges to it. But what I tell people is that I don't see equity crowdfunding as a different way to raise money for your company, but it's a way to build a fundamentally different type of company that never could have existed before. And so for us, our community, our shareholders, that is the core of the LegionM proposition. And we believe that if we're successful and if we can grow our community to have 1 million investors in it, that we can harness the wisdom of the crowd to make better business decisions, which benefits us and benefits all the shareholders, that we can use our community to decrease the risk of projects. I mean, simple examples, when we're doing custom merch, one of the ways that you can monetize film and television entertainment is custom merchandise. And we did, actually, as an example, we made a white label whiskey product that was tied to one of our films. And the minimum order quantity on that was, such. And so, most small independent films can't do a white label whiskey brand that's a tie-in. But we know that there's a community of people, there's a core community of LegionM people that are going to love this because of the fact that this is their movie and they're excited about it. And if that allows us to cover the minimum order quantity, now we can take a swing for the fences, right? Our goal with this was not to create a liquor that we could just sell to our shareholders, but our goal was the idea that we could use our community, use this unique product as a lever that would help gain exposure for the film, and maybe the liquor brand, could take off in some capacity. And so having our community that we knew would support what we're going to do allowed us to do something that would otherwise have been a big financial risk with, probably low odds of success. So, we believe that the shareholder community can reduce risk, and, in entertainment, it's a hit-driven business. It's a risk-driven business that drives so many of the decisions behind film and television. And so, because of the fact that we've got this community of fans that are part of LegionM, when we go to say we've got a movie and we're trying to get it funded by investors, and we can provide some of the funding maybe from our community, but we need to go to external third-party investors. This is the kind of the green light decision, which is huge in entertainment, because if you think about it, if you can get your movie funded, then you got a chance, right? Every film that you release, that's a swing of the bat, and it's a hit-driven business, and you're hoping that you can get a hit. But if you can't get your movie greenlit, then it is definitely a loss. That's like a strikeout, because it's a huge write-off of the time and money that you've invested in developing and trying to get out there. So if we can go to another investor, we're like, hey, we need, $5 million for a movie, or $10 million for a movie. And that investor, of course, has dozens or hundreds of movies to choose from. And which one would you rather invest in? Would you rather invest in a movie that has a large community standing behind it, or one that does not? All things being equal, you're going to go with the one that has a community behind it. And so the way that we kind of look at it is, having a community, it's not going to make a bad movie good. It doesn't make our product inherently better, but it does decrease the risk. It does increase the chances of success, and it gives it gives something that is good a chance to be seen. And so, like I said, every single thing that we do revolves around our community. The way that we look at it is, if you're an investor in LegionM, you own the company. We literally work for you. And we think that there's a huge difference between a fan-owned company and fan-made content. And I think that that's a really important distinction. In our case, it's media, but whatever your product is, I think there's a real art and science to figuring out what are the meaningful and interesting ways for your community to engage with you, and what are the decisions that your community can help you make thoughtfully. And the things that Richard was mentioning with BrewDog are perfect examples, like going out to them to find out where you've got a nexus of people in your community and opening a bar there. Like that's a perfect example. For us, we'll put different log lines and different movies ideas out as polls for people to vote on. And it's not a democracy. I mean, there's so many elements of the entertainment industry, and I'm sure in any industry, that just the investor, somebody on the street, like they don't understand. They don't have all the confidential background information that you've got. They don't understand necessarily the economics of the deal or how the industry works or that sort of thing. But when it comes to saying, is this a good movie or not? Like, we think our community is probably the best possible resource on the planet to help us answer that question. And so what we look for are ways that we can go out to our community in ways that are fun and interesting for them, that'll provide us with the data and the information and what we need to use our community as a lever to hopefully catapult the company to greater success, which benefits everyone.
Yeah, certainly. Jeff, thanks for sharing that experience. I'm curious, as you're going in some of the green light process, we mentioned the innovative nature of LegionM, right? One of the first, if not the first, to start with equity crowdfunding in mind. Are some of the folks that you talk to kind of forward? They're like, oh, you came with your own audience, sort of thing. What is the conversation like there? It's obviously a strategic advantage and part of why we're talking about it. I just imagine it may surprise some of them, obviously to the upside, where they say, oh, you have this community already. I'm curious about some of those conversations.
Oh, 100%. I mean, honestly, if LegionM was, LegionN and it was just Paul and Jeff and we're just two guys and we're out there, we wouldn't have achieved, honestly, probably anything. We came into this as outsiders. We're not Hollywood people. We're Silicon Valley entrepreneurs. This is the third company that we founded together. One of them was really successful. We were the first company to put live television on a cell phone back in the early 2000s, and we won a Emmy Award for that. And so, we have exposure to Hollywood, but we were by no means insiders. And so, we're coming right out of the gate. Stan Lee agreed to work with LegionM, and we didn't pay him any money. And Stan Lee was at a point in his life and his career when he could literally do whatever he wanted. Whatever he did was worth an enormous amount of money, and by and large, people would come to him and say, hey, we want you to do this and we're going to pay you this much. And that's how he would make his decision. But he just got what LegionM was about and jumped in, and that was suddenly we've got Stan Lee as an ally working for the company. Same thing with William Shatner, Kevin Smith, Dean Devlin. We've got an amazing advisory board with a lot of really powerful and influential people in Hollywood, and none of them have been paid a dime. They're doing it because they believe in the proposition. Because I think at the end of the day, when you look at the entertainment industry, every dollar in value comes from the audience, because we're the ones that buy the tickets and decide what to watch, and so every dollar in valuation of Netflix, Warner Brothers, and Disney and all these companies comes from the audience, and I think that most people in Hollywood understand that.
Yeah, well, my first thought there was, oh, it's interesting that they're sort of early adopters to the idea of distribution has changed, right? And when you have a direct relationship to the end customer, that is the distribution. But like you said, conceptually for folks in Hollywood, that's always, there may be intermediaries, but that's always been the relationship with the end user. So now I'm less surprised to hear that they're early adopters to that as you were going through that. But that's fascinating. It's tremendous to be able to get folks like that on board that would otherwise have to be coerced with some crazy contract to get them on. But it's they're loyalists to the industry, and that's a huge part of the industry, is that relationship with the fan. I'm curious, you talked about some of that engagement. What mediums are you talking to your shareholder base on? Is it email? Do you all do webinars? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's a great question. I mean, we've tried literally just about everything. And a lot of what we do is totally guerrilla. It's just lo-fi. I mean, hundreds of Google polls, which is super lame, but they, it gets the job done. Email, obviously, we send out an enormous amount of emails. I think communication with shareholders, there's a lot of fundamental challenges there. I mean, email is obviously an amazing medium, but anybody who's worked in email marketing or email communications before know that, everybody's inbox is completely overwhelmed and buried, and the number, that's one way to reach people, but it's not necessarily the best way. And the problem is that the world is so fragmented. And so, we have a LegionM shareholders only Facebook group, which is really active and really powerful for the segment of our community that's on Facebook. We also have a Discord channel, and, we have a Reddit forum, and we've tried, to meet people wherever we are. But at the end of the day, there's only one of me and one of Paul, and there's only so much time that we can spend engaging in social media. And so ultimately where we'd like to get to is something, I think, a little bit like what Richard is talking about, which is an app or a dedicated place, where we can just kind of center all of that activity. But we've done that. We also created, we've created iPhone apps. We created a game, we have this great Film Scout app, which allows us to help harness the wisdom of the crowd to choose films at Sundance and other film festivals. And we've used that to make purchasing decisions where, we can go and, it's actually a really fascinating problem when you get into it. Like, okay, how do you find a movie at Sundance if you're a distributor, or if you're in the entertainment industry and you want to buy a film or partner on a film? How do you figure out what's good? Again, we've got this secret superpower, which is this large community of people that we think is better suited than just about anything to help us make that decision. And so, anyway, it's kind of all over the map, but it is a challenge. And that's why I think that, having a centralized solution like Stakeholder Labs, having people that are solving this in generalized ways that make it easy for the individual issuers, I think is really powerful.
Fantastic. Jeff, thank you. Yeah, when you're talking about the mediums there, not letting perfect get in the way of, doing something that's good, whether it's email, it ties back to Matt's point. Don't be afraid to just bite something off and start with that. You can always expand and go from there. So I definitely see some tie in there and strategies. Want to save us some time on the back end for our audience to ask some questions in here. Let's quickly jump to a poll before we do that here. I'm curious about where people may be in their capital raising process. So for our participants, take a look at this survey here. Yeah, curious where everybody is in that thought process. As a lot of the tips have mentioned here so far, right? How do you start thinking about some of these things ahead of time, right? Jeff had mentioned their company was created with this in mind. LegionM, had done that. That's what the M stands for, right? Richard had mentioned, how they were able to tack on to this with the equity for punks and use that to engage them. So yeah. Was curious where everybody is at the capital raising process, because it's never too soon to start thinking about where and how to tie these into your capital raise and your engagement strategy. Thank you. All right, Q&A. We've had our experts on here. Anything in from the crowd that people are dying to have answered? Feel free to type them into the chat. I guess I didn't say functionally how to get them in. So no carrier pigeons. Please use the chat if you have any questions. Thank you, Jeff. I also, hope for an audience for my comedic material. As we're warming that up, right? I'm gonna focus on the key takeaways for folks, because I think you guys brought a lot to the table there. I want to, how do you see technology evolving to further enhance shareholder engagement? I think, Matt, for you as a technology provider in this space, I'm curious if you see mediums changing, right, or the uses of technology to enhance shareholder engagement.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what we see in the companies that we talk to, a lot of the simple technologies are being adopted. We talked about communications, things like email. You'd be surprised how many companies do not have regular email communications with their shareholders. Things like quarterly shareholder newsletters to make that happen. Giving the opportunity to have direct engagement through a video call once a quarter with your shareholders. Again, this is not new technology, email or video calls, but the application through a investor relations or a shareholder lens is new. And then I think as we've seen the fragmentation of brokerages and the ability to pick a brokerage based on the style of investing or the beliefs you have as an individual investor, I think that we'll see less and less friction with publicly traded companies between the brokerages that they use and the companies themselves. And ultimately, this is good news for the companies because that creates more access to data, more direct connections, and the ability to influence and design the shareholder experience. So we're seeing that adoption. And then I think a lot of these teams are looking at how can AI give them more capabilities. So generative AI, how can that expand their capabilities to communicate in a more personalized manner with their shareholders? So I think you will see that injected into existing tools, not necessarily being standalone products, but being a part of the suite of offerings around investor relations, both for public and private companies.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've got some other questions here. I'm going to shift to one from Alenka here. I'll answer the first part of this, but the question is along the lines of, setting your raise goals between conservative and potentially more optimistic. I personally, when I'm talking to customers thinking about their raise, talk about, it's actually what Richard had mentioned, some of this project-based financing, to make sure, if you only need to raise 1.2, you should not say that the goal is 5, right? It helps you fill up that round, particularly with online capital raising, right? The optics are public. So you want to have a smaller bucket to fill, if you will. And I think it sounds like Richard and his team had a lot of success with, hey, we're going to raise X to do Y. And then when you want to do Z, right, you can launch another round on the back of that, and it builds this momentum. So, Richard, I'd be curious how that aligns with you all. And then ultimately the tomorrow round, which, brought in all of this community. So, you not just have a larger shareholder base now, but you also have this larger community base for, the next raise. Is what I said there in terms of, selecting your raise goal carefully, potentially more conservatively, is that aligned with how you all have thought about it internally?
Exactly right. So we would always think about what our core goals were for the raise and what the target was for, we need to get at least maybe 2 million, 5 million, but then we clearly had some stretch goals as well. And typically we would launch a raise that had a limited window. So you could maybe invest for a 3-month period. But if we hit that goal within that 3-month period, then we would introduce some stretch goals and extend out the raise maybe by another 3 months or something like that. And that seemed to work really well, because what that did was it allowed us to also tag back into that shareholder engagement piece about, are we actually looking to invest in the right things here? Because if our initial goals were things that were not getting people excited, then they're not the things we should be doing as a business. If they're getting people really excited, it's okay. So our stretch goals are maybe more of the same or more of a laser focus on these specific things. And one of the key things that we did in our history back in 2016 was a crowdfunding to launch our US brewery. So we found a lot of passionate people in the US who were keen to invest in our business to get our beer more easily, more readily available in the USA. So it was a clear focus on that. We set our target, we hit the target, we stretched it, we hit that. And that was very, very useful.
Fascinating. Yeah, I like the use of the time-based opportunity, right? It's an important, urgency milestone for people to have. Everybody needs a deadline, right? It's a helpful way to bring the community in and have ways to engage them and say, hey, this is this is ending soon at this milestone, and then have your stretch goals on top of that. It's very well put. We are getting right up on time here, and I want to release everybody promptly. We'll be sure to share in a follow-up to everybody on the attendees and those that couldn't make it, links and contact information, not personal emails, but we'll supply a way to get in touch with all of these folks on their preferred medium. Speaking about shareholder engagement, I do just want to say a thank you again to Richard, Jeff, and Matt for bringing these insights together. You have different perspectives on how to build community and use that as a strategic advantage for your company. And it was fascinating to hear this. I had prepped the questions. So I was pretty sure I explored all the nooks and crannies, but you all definitely brought more insights that even I wasn't familiar with. So I just really want to thank you for your time and sharing these insights with everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks again for coming on. We're going to wrap up here. Like I said, we'll send out an email to everybody with information and these slides. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.